Hello and welcome to n=32 in the N+1 videos of MvvmCross. And what I'd like to talk about today is view models. And the particular reason I'm just going to start talking about view models is because I've just seen a question about MvvmCross and about composite view models and composite views. And I've seen this question asked today, and I've also kind of seen it asked a few times over the last few days. And I think I'm guilty of confusing people about what a view model is. So just to back up a little bit, I'm going to use a few slides from one of my presentations. This is from the Evolve presentation. And if I just start from the beginning of this presentation, but I'll zoom through the first few things. And what I'd like to do is I'd just like to talk about what view models are. And to do that, I'll start by talking about model view controller. Model view controller has been around, I keep saying it, since the 70s. And it's about having a model, which is your data. It's about having a view, which is your UI. And then it's about having this controller thing, which knows about your view and your model and kind of wires everything together. And that's obviously been replaced and it's evolved into MvvM. And this is where we start talking about view models. So in MvvM, you still have a model, and that's all of your data, all of your background services, perhaps all of your cameras and things as well on your phone. And then you have your view, and your view is perhaps these fields and trees and things here. But what you do is you try and digitize that view. So you take that view as a UI interface, and then you map it into a set of C# objects. So perhaps a set of properties like hills, lists of fields, lists of trees. And then you also put in there actions that you can take within that view, like going for a walk, for example. And data binding just binds those things together. So that's what I want you to think of as a view model. Unfortunately, because of the way that I've presented navigation, particularly in MvvmCross, then some people start thinking of view models as a view model represents a page. That's not true. It represents just a view. So if you happen to have 10 different windows on your screen, then you could have 10 different view models. If you happen to have a page with a list in it, and then you have those individual list items, then those list items will typically have a view model for each list item, because each list item that's shown on the screen is a view. And so that's what I really want you to try and think about, and to try to break away from this idea that a view model is something that's used as navigation. All that a view model is something that's there to represent a part of the user experience, really. I almost said screen as well, but it's not really about screens either. So let's dive into a demo and see if I can do anything that makes sense. So let us see if I create a portable class library, and this is going to go in N+1. Let's see if we can do this. So we are going to create a project called N32 View Models, and so this is going to be our vm.core. Let's call it composite. Compo.core is what we're going to call it. And we will create our normal choices. Done. And I'm going to be a bit risky in this one. I'm going to use the very latest beta code that I've actually added for MvvmCross. So it's going to be our local package source. And I'll install our MvvmCross packages. And then what I'd also like to do is I would like to add, before I do anything else, before I add any UI to this, let's take our first view model. And what I'd like to do is I would like in this first view model to have, I'm going to have some people. So let's add a person view model. And the fact that I'm going to inherit from MvxViewModel doesn't make it, you could navigate to it as a result, but you don't have to. You could instead, if you don't want to actually include MvxViewModel, there is also an MVX notified property changed you can inherit from. And that will make it, less of a navigable thing, if you like. But there's no harm really in using MvxViewModel as a base class. So it's up to you which you use. But you can break this association, if you can in your mind, from something that you navigate to and you happen to use with our navigation service, away from something that is a representation of a part of the UI of the screen, if you like. So let me just leave it as a person, and let me add in, so this person is going to have It's going to have a string which is first name. Ooh. It's going to have a string which is sorry, this is going to be first name as well. I've still got to finish this off. And then we'd also want another one which is going to be last name. And then what we'd like to do is the person is going to have an address. So let's add another view model for the address. And you might, not have this as a view model. You might even use bits of models and things. It's up to you how you split this out. It's a much more general MvvM question about how you break these things down. And so for the address, we will just put in a string, which is going to be the city. Obviously, you'd have a much bigger address than this. A string, which is the zip code, or postcode if you're using proper addresses. And then you could have a string, which is going to be the street address. Okay, so that's your address view model, and that's your person view model. And the person might itself have a couple of addresses, so let's do that. So we're going to have a PMVX, which is going to have an address view model. And so this will be home address. Just correct the typo. A bit OCD there, but that's cool. And then you might have another address which is going to be the this is going to be the work address, say. So that's your person who's got a work address and a home address. And then what we'll probably do is in the first view model, let us have a property which is going to be a list of, oops, that's not going to work so well, a list of person view model, which is going to be underscore people. So that's that, and I need to pull in that class. And then we might have a current person, so again, PMVX. And this is going to be a person view model, and this will be current. Right, so now we need to put some mock data in there. And so let's just do this in the constructor here. What we'll do is for I equals 0, y, and we will add 10 people in. I is less than 10, semicolon, I++, we'll keep this going. What we would do is that we would like to add, so we'll do a var list equals new list of people, person view model. And what we'd like to do is a var person equals new person view model. Within there we'll set the first name to be f plus I. The second last name is going to be L plus I. Obviously you might want to have better names than this for your thing. Your home address is going to be a new address view model, which is going to have city equals, so all of these are going to be a bit dull, C plus I, and what else we got here? Street address equals S plus I. And you can already kind of feel this isn't going to be something you navigate to, or maybe it is, but it's not a big detail for us at the moment. And then you've got a zip code which is going to be Z plus I for this home address. And we will then just add in this one final detail, which is work address, and that's going to equal one of these. So just to use a bit of cut and paste here for magic. Then we should be able to see, so we'll put a WC just for fun, a WS and a WZ, and then we're going to add to our list. So this is going to be list.add p, and at the end of this loop we will have our people equals list. So that's just going to create some random data for us, and hopefully that compo.core will build. So we've got a view model that's going to have some people in it, and is then going to have a each person's got a first name, a last name, a work address, and a home address, and each address has a street address, zip code, and city. Okay, so that's our data and that builds. So let's add a UI, and I'm tempted, because this is tablet, either to do Windows Store or to do iOS. And let's do iOS, seeing as that was what the questions seemed to be about. And let's do iPad for a change. So we're going to do hello world iPad, and we will take hold of the iPad, and we are going to do, let's do this as a, so what was it called, the project? Compo. We're going to do compo.touch. Hit OK. That's going to go off and create the basics for us. We're going to add a reference to our core, so that's compo.core. We're going to add references from NuGet, so again we'll go to local and add MvvmCross. And hopefully at this stage the only thing we need to do is to get hold of this file and to overwrite this default app delegate, and this should build. It says failed. What's it failed on? Let's just see. Okay, this should teach me to use my no, okay, that's okay. That's failed because obviously we don't have a hello variable anymore. That's cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our first view controller, and we know that we've got an iPad screen, so we've got quite a lot of room. And what we're going to do is we're not going to do these labels and things for now. Let me just comment those out in case I need the code in a minute. But what we'd quite like to do is we'd quite like to create a table, and we'll display the table down the left hand side of the screen. This is going to be very much layout by guesswork, but we'll be alright. And so this is going to be a new rectangle F, and it's going to be 0, 0, let's give it a 320 width because that's a nice width for our thing, and a height of, I can't remember, it's about 700 or something, isn't it? 720. And then what we'll do is we'll add the table to ourselves, and what we will do then is, so that's the table, that was cool. We'll then set up a source for the table, so the var source equals new, and let's just use a standard table view source because we don't want to write the cells at the moment. And as arguments to standard table view source, we pass in the table and we pass in the binding text. So the binding text we'd like to use here is that we would like to bind the, I think it's a title text, to the name of the person, which let's just go for first name at this stage. That should work quite nicely. And then what we need to do is we need to put the table.source equal to the source. That should work very easily. And we would like to link together that source so that it itself binds to the people collection on the so that would be the people collection on the view model. So what we'll do, this is why I kept this around, this bit of code, is we will take this set because it was the right set to have, and what we will do is we're going to bind the people. So this is we're going to bind the source, so let's just get this, and we're going to bind, so underneath the source we already know that its default property is its item source, so you don't have to have that 4-bit in there, and we're going to bind that to the people. Right, so let's just see whether or not this works, and as I say, you don't need this bit here, so I'll remove it and just rely on the default. Let us set this as the startup, and let's build. Does it build? And let's see whether or not we can launch this across on the Mac. Oh, it's saying there's a problem talking to the Mac, and it's saying that it couldn't find the selected thing. Let me just see. Okay, so it's not very happy about talking to my Mac at the moment. Let's just see if we can tease it, or if I have to restart Visual Studio. Device not found. Let's see, can I use any of these refresh? Claims to be attached, but it doesn't want to talk. Is there anything? Right, so let me just restart Visual Studio and see if I can tease it into motion. This is just the connection across to the Mac that's failing, and it might be because I was doing some work with an iPhone earlier and it's just getting upset. Let's see whether or not we can tease it into motion, or it might have been that I didn't select the right thing there as well. That could have happened. So let me just see if I go. So I just reloaded the solution, nothing else. And if I choose iPhone Simulator, and then here, right, so now I can choose the iPad, and I hope, be able to deploy to that. Let's see. Right, so it claims to be going across. Let me start up my VNC viewer. And that's not its address at the moment. It's on 0.7. And I need to pass in my password. And then hopefully that'll start up. And I can tell you it's already started here, but unfortunately I haven't logged in yet. So let's just do that. So here is my list with my 10 people in it, all named F0 through to F9, and you can see they're there, and the rest of the UI is clear at the moment to do things. Right, so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to do a few more bindings, and hopefully I can do this. So let me stop running that, and let's bind also the source. We would like to bind the sources, and I believe that this source should have, let me just see, it's got a selected item, and I think we should be able to bind that to the current person. And let's just make sure, we could also specify that should be a two-way, but it should be a two-way by default anyway. And let's add a couple more fields to the screen. So I'm going to use this label. And for now I'm going to put everything into the UI, but in a moment we'll hopefully also pull this out and do it a bit differently. So what I'd quite like to do is I'd quite like to have text fields actually rather than labels. I pulled the wrong thing out. So let me get these text fields. And obviously you might want to use a designer and use the zib editor to generate some of these UIs, but for now I'm going to generate them myself. So we're going to have a text field, and this text field we're going to build up, and let's get it, we're going to put it at 330 across the screen, 10 down, and we'll give it again just 320 and 40. Those sound like good. So this is going to be the text field name. Text field name. We're going to have a text field last name, text field last name, and we'll put those just a little bit further down the screen. And we would then quite like to have, what else did we have? We had the addresses, so I'll come back to the addresses in a moment. But for now, let's just do this text field name and text field last name, and let's bind those as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to bind the text field name, and this is going to bind, we're just going to bind its text. We want to bind it two-way, and that's going to bind to current first name, and the text field last name we'd like to bind to the last name. So let's see whether or not this works, or whether I've got some bugs to sort through. So that will build and compile and then get sent across to my Mac. There is an iPad simulator waiting. Hopefully it's being sent across the network here. Right, so now if I select something, then you can see we get these text fields here, and if I start editing these, then we should get the two-way binding. So if I change F5's first name to be James, then you can see you get the data binding in effect. and if I change to F4 you can see it's all pushed through. So that's cool, you know, that's a view model here. There's lots of little view models going on in each row. There's a view model for the whole page as well. So that's a little bit of improvement. Let's suppose now we want to take a look at addresses, and we could just continue adding in fields here and doing addresses, but that's a bit painful really. It would be much nicer if we just did kind of a composite view, or even, you know, something that bundled things together. So let's just do that. And let's create a public class, and we're going to call it a AddressView. Why not? So, you know, this is a view. It is actually more of a UI view than it is a MvvmCross navigable view, if you like. And what we'll inherit from is we will inherit from a so this is just going to be a UI view we're inheriting from, really. We could just inherit from a UI view, and if we did that, then we wouldn't get any data binding. We could inherit from a UI view controller, but again, I'm not sure we really want to do that. So let us do this as the easy way is to inherit from something called, let me just find the right name for it. So I think the right name for it was MvxView. So what this is this is a very simple UI view, and in fact you can probably see it if we go to the Object Explorer. It's a very simple UI view that just has a data context added, and it's a very useful way if you don't want to put a full view controller together, just to build up a view. So this is going to be an address UI view, and we'll just override the constructor which allows us to construct it ourselves. And in this, what we're going to do is we're going to add a text view, so we can just copy the code from here. Let's do this. So let's set the background color to be a nice background color that gives us something useful so we know we're there. This is going to be a grey. Oh yeah, let's go for grey. Oh no, let's be a bit more colourful. This is going to be a green. And what we'd like to have is we'd like to have a text field name and a text field last name. So we would like to have, let's just put these a bit more smoothly in there. You can obviously do better layout and, you know, responsive layer and adaptive layout type things. We'd like to have 3 fields in there, and these are going to be the text field, and I think we had a street address. So text field street, it's going to be the first one. And then after that we'd like to have the text field for the city. And then after that we'd like to have the text field for the zip code. And obviously that one's just going to be further down the screen. So those are our zip codes and things. And what we'd like to do is we would like to bind these things to our own properties, to the properties of our view model. And what we're going to say is we would like to delay bind, because we don't need to bind this until we actually have an object passed to us. And what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to delay bind this, and what we'll do is we'll create a binding set equals, so this dot create binding set. And this is going to be a binding set from an address UI view to an address view model, if you remember one of those. So we've got this address UI view to address view model that we'd like to bind to. What we're going to do is we're going to bind, and we want to bind our text field street to the view models vm.city. No way, we want to bind that to the street address, please. Sorry about that. And we'd like to bind the other two as well, so we're going to bind the city to the city, and we would like to bind the zip code to the zip code. And then obviously at the end of that we just need to make sure we apply the set. So that is an address UI view, and you can see it's got these things. It's complaining about that being a virtual method in the constructor, so we'll do that. So it's going to have a green background to it. It's going to have these 3 fields. Obviously you could have drop downs and all sorts of other things. You don't just have to stick to text. And it's going to bind to its view model, and this is a simple view if you like. So that's our address UI view, and what we'd like to do here is in first view we would very much like to add one of these. So let's just do it. So instead of creating a new UI text field here, what we're going to do is create one of those address views. And so this is an address view equals new address UI view. And your naming is your own thing here. And again, we probably would like to give that a location so that it doesn't flow the rest of the screen. So let's give it a frame equals new rectangle F, and let's give this a frame of, so we'd like it to sit at 330 across the screen. We'd like to sit at 90, and we'd like to give it width of 320, and we'd probably want to give it a height of, so what's it got in it? 3 of these guys. So we'd like to give it a width of 140, say, to give it room for a bit of padding as well. And that's going to be our first address view, so let's add it to ourselves and let's check that that works. So what we'd like to do is we would like to bind the address view. Here it is, address view, and what we'd like to bind is for its, we'd like to bind for its, and it'll have a data context, I hope. There it is. We'd like to bind its data context to the current home address. Yeah. And let's also just do that. Why not? Let's just add another one. How wrong could this go? Let's add another address view. So this is going to be address view 2. And this one we need to put down the screen a bit more. So we're going to add another 140 to our 90. And so this is going to be a 250, say. And what we'll also do is, just to make it stand out, this address view 2 will set its background color to be UI color. It's going to be unusable by the time I've finished, .red. And then just also to make this stand out a little bit more, let us take our binding for our table, and instead of binding the title text to first name, I'm just going to bind the title text to the whole object, which you can do just by using title text on its own, or by putting a dot in as well, I think, so I'll try that. And so let's give the person object, wherever it is, here, let us give him a or her a toString. So let's do that, override toString, and what we'll do, actually no, I suppose that's, it's not going to update as nicely, so I won't do that. Ignore that section altogether. I'm just going to leave it as first name. Unfortunately it just doesn't show as much detail that way, but it should be okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll then run this up. Let's see whether or not it builds. Build. Okay, so they both build. Let's see whether or not this runs, or whether I've made any fatal errors, or any of my locations wrong in particular. So it's building, sending it across the network. And what you can see here is we've obviously got our green and our red sections, and we've got our items. And if we click on F6, then you can see we get the items for F6. We don't get anything for the second area, which makes me think I probably didn't bind it, so I'll come back to that. But hopefully you can see as we select things, this definitely updates. So let me find out what I did wrong. And the answer is I got distracted, and I did address 2, but I never bound it to anything, so let's do that. So address view 2, we would like to bind to the work address. And so we can build this up, debug, start new. So it's deploying across the network, compo.touch, and hopefully now if we select F9 for example, and we say, well, that's not his or hers zip code at all, her zip code is, you know, Texas 1, and we really should have set their city to be London or something, and we should have set their first name to be Jane. Then obviously if we then come across and do some others, then, you know, this person's first name is Fred, and then we can go to F6 and perhaps change something. So this again, let's just change first names because that's easy, is Bob, nice girl's name. And now if you look at these, we should see this. If we go back to Jane, then Jane still has London and Texas 1 in there. and so these view models are tied together. So that's cool, you know, that works. But we could also replicate this again if we wanted to. So you could, you know, put in another set of information here that would be the last but one selected or something like that. You can obviously animate changes if you need to, although that does require a little bit more work with the binding. Actually, I may have lied there. I don't know how you animate it, but there's bound to be a way. But you can see here how, you know, this is a view that's been bound to a view model. AddressView is kind of its own entity here. If you wanted to bind multiple people, you easily could. If you wanted to open up views when things changed, you probably could do that as well. It might get a bit messy, but you could probably do it. We could have a go at that. This has been quite a short little session so far. So let me see whether or not we could do that. And let us see. So what you might want to do, for example, let's see, is let's say that we want to take this a little bit further, and let's say we'd like to take this address view idea, and let's say we'd like to have a view for a person view, which is also going to inherit from MvxView. And what we would like to do for our person view, again, we'll just have a simple constructor. There are other constructors you might want to consider, but we'll just do this one. And what you might want to do for this person view is you might want to put all of this text field and address into that person view. So let's do this. So, you know, it's probably not as good putting it in the constructor as putting it in a separate init method or something. So we'll do this, and we'll just put in 10, 10. Just make them a bit nicer in terms of layout. So that's our person added here, and then we'd like to add the binding. So again, I'm going to use this delay binding technique, and I'll just copy and paste. Should be good. So here you're going to see, you know, a view within a view within a view in terms of binding, but that should all be fine. And so this person is going to be a person view, which is going to bind to a person view model. And what we'd like to do is we obviously would like to bind the text field. Okay, so we've got the bindings for this already, they're down here. So let's just copy them out of there and copy them here. And it's not going to be a current anymore, it's just going to be that. Because what we're now going to do, gosh, I've never done this before, this is quite entertaining, is what we'd like to do now is we'd actually like to set up a little handler here. So I probably shouldn't have deleted the old code, but this is cool. What we'd like to do is we would like to listen for when the selected item changes on the view model. So to do that, what you can do is you can get hold of the view model, and the view model by default doesn't even have property changed on it. So we're going to do a iNotify property changed on it. Or we could bind to, that might be, oh gosh, there's so many opportunities here. And what I'd quite like to do is I'd like to subscribe to property changed, and I'd like to use a trick where I weak subscribe to it. Because if you strongly subscribe, so you know this is really getting technically now, but if you strongly subscribe to iNotify property changed, then you'll end up in trouble when you or you can potentially end up with memory leaks. So you really don't want the view model having strong references back to you, so you just weak subscribe to these events. And what we're going to get on these events is obviously we'd like to weak subscribe to, and this is going to be, possibly I'm causing myself trouble here, this is going to be, so this is view model property changed. We just want create this as a method. Okay, I need to add it myself. Once ReSharper doesn't want to do it for me. View model property changed. This is going to be object sender property changed event args. And that should start to come in. No, let me just one moment take a look at this. I'm not sure why that's not coming in, but I know that, alright, at least I think I know that it should come in if I use the namespace serious.crosscore week subscription, then that should pull that in. So it's saying, maybe I don't need the property change. Maybe that's it. So that was it. I just had the syntax wrong. So as long as I've got a notify property changed, I can week subscribe to it. And then what I'm going to do in here is if args.property name equals, and so this is going to be the C current. Right, so then what I'm going to do is a lot more straightforward. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to launch a new child window whenever this happens. So here we go. I am going to go for and let's just also make sure if ViewModel. So our ViewModel by default is just an MvxView model, and we'd quite like to get a typed one here. So let's just add one. So what we're going to do is protected, and this is going to be obviously a first view model is what we kind of expect to get. And so let's just call it protected first view model, and let's add a get handler to it, and that's going to return, and we'll just cast it, or do an as view model as first view model, and that's just to give us a easier access to what our data context / view model is. And that then means that this week subscribe can happen on the first view model, and it means that here we can use a typed object, which means we get IntelliSense and things. So if current does not equal null, then what I'd like to do is I'd like to open up a window. So open new display for let's do it for first view model.current. And so what we'll do is add a semicolon to the end of that, and then we'll create the method from new display. And so what we want to do in here is we'd like to create a new window. Let's see whether or not we can do this. This is going to be a PersonView. Let's do it. For PersonView equals new PersonView, and the PersonView we would like to add with a location. So let's do that. So PersonView.rectangle.frame equals, and what we're probably going to have to do here is we're probably going to have to manage this in some way, but to start with, let's just have a really trivial private int offset, and we'll start that at 330, and we'll see how it goes. So our offset is going to increase, so let's do the rectangle f as offset 10, 320, and well, we don't mind 900 or something big. And then what we'll do is PersonView dot, and we can just set the data context, and this time we're not binding it, we are actually always just saying from now on your data context is fixed as current, so it's not going to be hooked up to change dynamically when the list changes. It is giving it its data context forever and saying goodbye to it. And then the last thing we do is we add the person viewer to ourselves, and also just so that we get a nice kind of cascade, let's set actually let's do an offset y as well, just for fun. So we can have an offset x of 330 and an offset y of 10, and then that means we can use offset x and we can use offset y. And what we should be able to do at the end of this is just do offset x plus equals 20 and underscore offset y plus equals 20. And obviously this is going to be a bit of a mess on the screen, and actually let's make those a bit bigger just so that we've got a nicer effect. And then when we run this up, unless I've made some hideous mistakes, which I may have done, then that should build and run, and it's transferring across the network. Running up, and now when we hit one of these, there's our F6, and we can edit this if we want to, and we can change the city name or whatever this is, this field, to RR, we're all pirates, and the name can change to Liz, and so there it is, and Liz is changed. And then if we change to F7, you see we get an F7 UI over the top, and if we change to F8 we'll get an F8, and if we change to Liz then we'll get another Liz. And in this other Liz, we can change Liz's name again to Liz Beth. And what you should see is everything is data bound to these objects. And obviously, you know, this UI that I've kind of invented here with these practical cascades is not lovely in any sense. But it is workable, and you can see how you could build up much more advanced UIs very straightforwardly, and you know, it would start to look more like a real UI if you did that. And at one point the Twitter UI kind of looked like this, although it was much nicer and had you know, cascades and things that you could use. But I hope that, you know, gives you an idea of where you could head at least. You know, this is still bound as well, this Lisbeth, so you can change this one and everything will change. So I'm heading to familiar territory on Foo. You'd almost certainly, to turn this into a real app, you'd want to do some sort of management on these things, and you'd also want to give them some sort of background so they had some chrome around them or something like that. And you know, the list you might want to do another way. You'd also want to handle rotation of your iPad for the users. You wouldn't want to force them into portrait or landscape. But I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what you can do. It didn't take very long, I hope. I'll have to go back and actually find out. The key things that we did here, the key bits of technique were, and I'll just stop running, where we have looked at the key message. In the view models, we used view models in ways where we're not using show view model, we're just setting the view model ourselves or letting the UI choose what the current one is or something like that. You know, there's nothing here going on which is show view model and some complicated scenario underneath about sending intents or sending URIs or anything like that. This is just the view model being manipulated as direct iNotify property changed objects. And then in the views, what we've done is we have used a top level view model controller, this first view, and within there we did bind a few objects directly, just the source and that. But then we showed that you could use these MvxView base class to provide data binding within its own data context, and you could either bind the data context of that fixed view if you wanted to, and it might just, yeah, I'm not sure. I'll do one little demo at the end of this. So we showed, you know, that you could bind the fixed view if you wanted to, and you could bind in here. But you also you could weak subscribe, and it's really important that you weak subscribe, not strong subscribe. You could weak subscribe to the iNotify property changed, and that would give you access directly to the iNotify property change property name. And then once you've got that, then you can do whatever you want in terms of UI, including adding lots more views which themselves have composite views, which have composite views within them, and then it's up to you to manage the UI. And if you do start looking at this, then I would recommend you look at GitHub at some of the solutions out there. As I say, there was a Twitter iPad UI which was beautiful at one point with floating windows, and that's been ported, and a few other people have ported other kind of floating sliding windows, and it's worth looking at those to see how you might fit them together. Right, so I just want to do one last thing, which is actually I'd quite like to move all of this display over a bit more. So I'm going to move this across to 600. And I'd quite like to give the person view, this thing, a background, and not to make, so again, I'm just going to background color equals, and I'll give it a UI color dot light gray, just to give it some contrast to the background and so it doesn't stand out. And you might want to put, you know, a drop shadow and some chrome around it as well. But what I'd then like to do is I would like to have a var person view, and this is going to be the current person view at all times, and this is going to be new person view, and I'll give it its rectangle, so current person view dot frame. I'll position this one at 320, and this is going to be 0, no, it's a bit 10, and I'll give it a width of 320, and I'll give it a height of, again, something obscenely large. That's cool. And I'll add that person view to myself, and then I'll bind that person view. And what this will give me, hopefully, is a little bit more of a sense of what the current one is as well. So what we're going to do is a vm.current. Yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. So we want to bind the person view, this current person view, to there. And then what we should do, unless I've made a mistake, let me just check where I set it, the offset, 600. Okay, that'll do for now. what you should be able to see when we run this up is we should now have kind of a 3-column effect, and in the left hand column we'll continue having the list. So oops, it's not running. In the left hand column we should have the list, in the middle column we should get the current person, and in the right hand side we should get the stack. So here's our current person, and you can see if we do that we get that, but we also get the history stack coming through. And then if we change our current person here as an F4, then you can see that that updates everywhere because we've got data binding going on. That's hello working. And you know, if we then change to F5, then that changes and the current person display changes and the history stack's there. So it kind of now shows you all 3 effects that you can get. You can get these dynamic views. Obviously you don't want to continue growing these dynamic views forever because this is going to get out of hand. But you've got this, you know, multiple areas here. You could add more views if you want to and just data bind different parts of them. There's no worries about that. You know, perhaps you'd have an address label view, or you know, a credit view, or whatever else you might have. If you need to start messaging between things, then the messenger's there for you to use. Here, you know, it's also C# there for you to use. It's entirely up to you how you architect that side of your program. But it should at that stage become more like code. There is, you know, there's a certain amount of naughtiness here in that this open new display is all code behind on the view side, but you're allowed some of that. You're allowed to have some reaction within the UI. If you really wanted, you could probably say, well, I don't want this view model property change to happen here. I'd actually like to have some command in the UI that does something. I'm okay with you if you want to do that, and I completely agree with you from a conceptual point of view, because then you could respond to that message across all the UIs. Perhaps you could even do it using a show view model and it would be lovely, but you know, it's up to you how you choose to do these things. I don't mind. I could demo that if you want, but I think I've probably said enough. This, I hope, should give you some feeling for, you know, different ways you can do things. Whether or not they're good ways, I'll let people argue out at the zealot level within MvvM. The main thing, the main message, and it's probably in my slides actually. Yeah, somewhere in this slide deck is the main message, and the main message is, zooming through, not the hero break, not DOMBox, not PCL, not IOC, although these are all very good messages. Not convention over configuration either, although again it's a very good message. This is the main message. The main message is Tiaki Aki Iki, which is really short for the app is king, is king, is king. So whatever happens, make sure that you ship an app and that the app does what you and your users want it to do. Yeah. Arguing about structures and anything else just doesn't make any sense. Make sure that you ship and that the app is lovely. Okay, that was a different, very different, I presume. N equals 32. I hope it showed you a totally different type of UI you haven't seen before, and I hope it showed you how quickly you could build up a UI like that, and how, you know, data binding within subviews can work. You could do the same sort of thing on Android, and I think if you look back at the custom control example, or if you look back at the fragment example, then at the end of the fragment example there's something called an MVX frame control, and it's well worth looking at what the MVX frame control does. Perhaps I should demo that now, but no, I'm not going to. I'm going to let you look at that yourself. You could also do the same thing in Windows, and in Windows you just look at user controls because they have a data context already, and you can use them. Okay, that's enough from me. That was N equals 32, and it was a very different type of talk, but I hope it's eye-opening at the very least to you. Okay, have a good one out there, and hopefully the sun will arrive here soon.